Welcome to Unlock Success, how data can drive growth in cannabis. We have an exciting group of people together here today to share insights and experience about how to maximize the use of data to drive growth, spot problems and correct them, and mature your operations. My name is Eldon Brown. I'm the CEO of Broadleaf, and our mission is to elevate our customers, plants, people, and profit, and integrate all the data that they didn't have before. So we have a couple uh, of platforms and products. One is a cultivation management platform that is used to manage day-to-day operations in the grow. And we're going to talk about a new reporting and analytics offering towards the end of today. But our goal is to provide tools and services to our customers to help them be more efficient and more profitable. We've assembled a great panel today of people that are going to talk about the use of data, some of the challenges in getting to or leveraging the data in their environments. So I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves, and we'll start with Sarah McGuire from MGO.
Sure. I'm Sarah McGuire, a partner at MGO based in Chicago. Focus on the cannabis space and spend about 90% of my time working with cannabis companies and related businesses, anything from companies that are pre-operational all the way up to supporting the large MSOs and everything in between.
Great. Well, thanks, Sarah, for joining. We also have Brian Gruber, who's the CEO of Carbonex.
Yeah, thanks, Eldon. Thanks for having us today. Appreciate it. Yeah, Brian Gruber. I'm part of the Carbonex family of companies. We have Franklin Fields, which is our cultivation, the Botanical Co., which is our dispensaries. And then we have Una Labs, which is our lab processing center. And then we just opened up Kalkushka Lounge, which is the first open to the public consumption lounge in the state of Michigan. So we're pretty excited about that. But we obviously partnered with Eldon and Broadleaf to make a lot of the decisions in our expansion and growth. And my background, it comes from the last place I was at was the largest private label drug manufacturer in the world. I was in charge of their global strategy and manufacturing footprint. And so it's fun to bring those skill sets to the cannabis world and really make a difference. And our group is super excited about what we have going on in Michigan and the imprint that we're making, and helping to push this industry forward in a direction that's going to make a positive impact at the end of the day.
Thank you, Brian. Last but not least, we have Dave Murray, the CEO of Redbud Roots.
Thank you, Eldon and Team Broadleaf, for having me on today. My name is Dave Murray, one of the founders and CEO of Redbud Roots, vertically integrated cannabis company. We have 4 grow facilities in Michigan, 2 processing labs, 1 manufacturing and distribution facility that produces all of our other products like cannabis-infused beverages, tinctures, water-soluble gummies, and things like that. We also have 5 dispensaries, but we are starting to focus the company more on cultivation, lab, and just outright production. So we're actually weaning away from the retail side and liquidating those assets. My former background was I was a commodities trader. I ran a series of hedge funds, and so my background was mainly looking at data and having to make decisions in a matter of 3 to 5 seconds that were worth millions of dollars. And so data for me is the most important thing that drives business today and every day. So that's why I'm a big fan and proponent of Broadleaf.
Thanks, Dave. We're going to spend most of the time that we have today kind of hearing from the panel, and we're going to talk about the different ways that they are leveraging data. One of the things that we found in the industry is our background at Broadleaf. Part of our DNA is enterprise software and data warehousing and reporting. And so, as the cannabis industry matures, there are a lot of different point solutions for cannabis in the different areas for cultivation and accounting and processing and wholesale and retail. And at this stage, there is some integration happening, and some of those platforms are better than others at offering interconnectivity, but a lot of that data is still pretty disjointed. So obviously, in order to make better decisions, we need to leverage the data. So I've got a few questions that I'm going to pose to our panel, and would love to hear your feedback and advice for people who maybe are still getting licensing or just starting their operation, and some lessons learned that you can share. So the first question that I have is, what are some of the ways that your organization is using data to make better decisions? And and Sarah, for you, you're working with with cultivators and processors and distributors, and so would really like to understand from an accounting perspective, from a financial perspective, also what data that is helpful to you in the work that you're doing.
Sure. So the accurate financial reporting is key to even be able to make your business decisions and understand how you're doing in your business. And a lot of cannabis companies, just as a result of such high growth and a lot of different initiatives, it can be very hard to decipher the information and analyze it the way it's needed to be. But like you've all seen, analyzing the metric data from the seed to sale system, making sure it's accurate and that there's no human errors, which having something input as a 2 instead of a 20 can have a significant impact on on the results of the data, and then going into the financial reporting. The other types of data that all companies are relying on, in addition to, say, the banking activity, in addition to seed to sale, also if you're in retail, the point of sale systems, and then still, just with the infancy of the industry, a lot of spreadsheets still being maintained to try to understand the different data points and exactly where the improvements are needed in a company's business.
Great, thank you. So, Brian, can you talk a little bit about at Carbadex some of the ways that you're using data for decision making?
Yeah, I mean, it's a part of every decision that we make as a team, starting with, as Sarah mentioned, our financial data. I would say the first couple of months we were flying pretty blind until we got good financial systems in place where we could, once you start making decisions, you have to have a good scoreboard to see if those decisions are making the correct financial impacts. And that was a big step for us after we had been operating for a few months, getting our financial system squared away. That data then helped us drive, then we pull a lot of data from like PDSA and market data to then help us decide, what products is the market really asking for, instead of what products do our lab technicians think are awesome and what do they like. It was, okay, what is the market asking for? And so we started really diving into those numbers and seeing where are their opportunities, and then also seeing, how many of these products are they oversaturated? Is there too many companies already making those products? Kind of trying to find ways to carve out niches from a product standpoint on the processing side. And then we're using data, every day in the cultivation and processing, just through outputs and deciding what strains, what kind of fertilizers we use, how much we water, everything, intensity of the lights. I mean, every single input that we're doing, the genetics, how do the genetics work? I mean, every decision we have is based off data that we are pulling from our facilities and our processes. And at the end of the day, driving variation out of the system, making life boring is our goal, so that as we make improvements, we know if those improvements actually was what made the difference, or was it just variation, right? And then until you can distinguish between variation and improvements, you're going to struggle with knowing whether the actions really paid off or not. So everything we do is data driven.
Great. Dave?
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback on what Brian is saying, pretty much everything we do is driven by data. But I remember some of the early days for us when we were just starting the cultivation side, and we had maybe had 2 or 3 harvests, and we were looking at what to fill the next set of rooms. And we had some initial data on what yields were and what THC was, and what each crop would generate for a price per pound and stuff like that. And I remember walking into a room that had been filled with sorbetto at that point. The whole room was filled with sorbetto, and me knowing the data of it being one of the lower yielders, one of the lower THC, and one of the lower price per pound, I sat there and questioned my grow team and said, why did you guys pick this to grow? And they simply said, well, it's our favorite thing to smoke. And, kind of like what Brian's saying, it's not just what you like to smoke or what's a cool product or something like that. There's a lot more that's involved in this. And I actually sat down with them and tried to do the math and show them, like, if you put 200 of these plants in this room versus 200 of a Snoop Dogg or a Motor Milk, you're going to generate twice as much revenue. That didn't really resonate with them that much, because they're sitting there looking at all these spreadsheets, and like Sarah said, everyone has their own spreadsheets. Well, when we got broadleaf, and we got the aperture side of broadleaf as well, we were all looking at the same spreadsheets and the same data points. And then to take it a step further, it really was able to get the buy-in from the team, because now they were able to kind of see that scoreboard. Because I think a lot of teams or a lot of companies are kind of, maybe the CEO has the visibility and stuff like that, but we try and show everyone in our company complete transparency. We show them what our profitability was, or lack thereof, and why, and get them to be bought into literally, like, what is their autonomy and accountability on how they can help lead this number into a better spot. And so we look at the very granular stuff now at this point, and it's really allowed the team to be bought in, and now they're chasing stuff. Some of the other things we look at is rosin. Hash rosin's been a big leader for us, and we've been really increasing how much gardening we grow for rosin development. That's a whole nother set of data that you have to chase, because it's going to yield 1 part for flower, and then there's a whole nother extraction process that's going to tell you what kind of rosin yields you're going to get out of that. So that has allowed us to really stay competitive and profitable, because what you're seeing in the Michigan market is a massive commoditization. You're seeing prices go from Brian, I don't know what you're seeing, but when we first started, we were getting $3,000 to $4,000 a pound, and now the market average is, below 1,000. For us, we're still in the thousands and 1,500s, but most guys are living right around 1,000 to 800, and chasing other things like rosin for your production and finding a 5, 6, 7% yield on that. That equates to a $3,500 a pound, like we were doing before. And when my cultivation team's bonus compensation is based on those numbers, that they're going to be bought in to chase those things. So it has given us the transparency that we're looking for, so that everybody on our team is bought into the same end goal. And you don't necessarily want it to be about money. You want it to be about other things, but money certainly drives people. So that's some of the ways we've been looking at it.
Yeah, those are some great examples. What are some of the you consider like the key sources of data that you have, and then how, and also then how do you actually collect and use that data today? And I'll throw that out for anyone.
Well, for me in the very beginning, I realized I was collecting my own data based on, harvest reports that my compliance team were putting together, but they didn't always match up to the same exact harvest reports that went to the final, sales team, because there's loss rates, there's flower to trim ratios, and then after you put it through your table sorter, you're going to get some A buds, some B buds, and some popcorn buds and stuff like that. So my data wasn't 100% accurate. And when you go through the Aperture model, which is metric integrated stuff, it's all the same data. So for us now, we all go off of the same data by using Aperture and Broadleaf, because it's all what the compliance knows is the metric, which is the gospel. And for me, I've always been trying to chase what is the gospel, because if there's 3 different spreadsheets with 3 different results, you don't know which one is the truth. And you just got to figure out which one is closest to the truth and go. And that's how we've been collecting the data and trying to look at it.
Yeah, I think that, there's definitely all these different tiers of data that we pull from. And, the more global data of the market obviously is not as, precise as we'd like it to be, but it's kind of a good, meter for us to say, hey, are we heading in the right direction or not? Where the broadleaf data that we pull at, the level of real things in process checks and what's going on day to day, that data is so critical to be in, right on. And as Dave said, everyone on the same page and understanding the data, that it's accurate, because those decisions are really the decisions at the end of the day that are make or break the operation and how we drive the variation out of the processes. So that's what we like about broadleaf too. It's like Dave was saying, everyone's on the same sheet of music and all going towards the same goals, which is, you can't replace continuity with everybody with other things, and data is the one truth that everyone can sing on the same sheet of music. So I really enjoy it. It's been great. It's been great for, especially on the cultivation side. The cultivation team wasn't necessarily would be considered a data-driven group of people before, right? So to help them understand how data can make their lives easier and help them make better decisions and take the chaos out of the work and start making much better decisions based on data and not just based on, well, I think this is the issue. You gain believers really quick when they start following the data and they see the results, and then they see the results in the data, and then they see the profitability come along with it. It speaks for itself. So it's fun. It's fun to see that light bulb go off with the team, because they, before, it's always an art until you explain the science, right? And then when you drive variation out, at the end of the day, you have all those pieces of variation. The more you can eliminate, the more consistent you'll be, the more you can predict what's going to happen. Obviously, there's always things that are going to happen, but the more predictable, the better it is to run a business. And, managing the people side too, and just understanding how the team is doing at each room. We have team members that own their own flower rooms. So all the data is their data, and they're prideful in that. And people are proud of what they do, and that helps too. So yeah, it's been an exciting transformation for our team.
Yeah, well, it's, old adage is you can't improve what you can't measure. And, that sometimes the measurements are imperfect, but if you have consistency and you're collecting this, the data consistently and looking at it regularly through the same lens, then, you can start to spot trends and identify where problem areas are. Maybe the data won't alone tell you what the problem is and how to fix it, but it can certainly point you in the direction of where to look. I think that's what we've seen, and this, the industry is maturing. I think even in the last couple of years, there's a lot more automation available in different areas, and there are more and more from a data collection and software side. We're seeing that companies are making APIs available so that you can actually get to the data, and bring that data together. I don't think spreadsheets will ever completely go away, right? You're always going to have certain things you're trying to collect, even if you're just trying to troubleshoot something for a short period of time. Spreadsheets aren't going to go away completely, but I think whatever we can do to automate or eliminate the slog of exporting data, processing it, finessing it in Excel to turn it into something useful, that's saving time and giving time back to people who can do things, do other things besides build spreadsheets all day. So along those lines, I'll throw out, what are some of the challenges you've had in either collecting or really putting the data that you have to good use?
I can go first on that one. I've got a little bit of a different perspective from an accountant's point of view rather than an operator. But I wanted to add one thing to your comment, Eldon, because I agree that spreadsheets won't go away, but everyone loves automation and loves to be able to get the data. We're doing less work and also understanding what the expectation of what the results should be. So if there's the different streams that Dave was talking about, and he has people that basically own the metrics in that room, they should at least be able to give an expectation of, here's what we've seen based on what we've done. And then that can, go into the financial reporting, help you predict your results, help you, even predicting things like Dave had mentioned, the staff compensation based on the results. You can't really, unless you have the data and some expectation, you really don't have the ability to do that. So that was one item I wanted to add. And then on just collecting the data, was the question, Eldon, how is it collected and what are the different avenues to do that?
Yes, yeah.
So I usually see it really is a lot of different spreadsheets, but obviously running the information out of Metric, reviewing it, seeing if there's any items that are obvious human errors or obvious mistakes. And also understanding if you have that expectation of what the numbers should look like, someone who's experienced should be able to look at it and think, well, I think I'm missing X, X, and X. And then you can investigate why that's not on the report. Maybe the package, maybe there were shipments that weren't noticed, or maybe there were shipments and it didn't make it into Metric. So those are some of the types of things that I see companies gathering and then kind of trying to poke holes in the data and understanding where the issues are.
From my seat, it starts with trying to find one problem, and it leads to a series of other problems, which hopefully is the end-all solution. So one thing that we noticed, and I think we talked about it before the call, was how we were seeing different rooms have different results. Now, our rooms had the same square footage, they had the same equipment, same HVAC, and we were putting the same genetics or phenos into these rooms and getting different results from flower room 8 versus 9. When we saw that as not just a one-off, but it was a series of times where one consistently worked better and operated better than the other, we were able to go deeper because we also have the broadleaf full package, which has the cultivation side as well. And we were able to pull all of our irrigation logs. And I was able to see, we grow in organic soil, so it's not just a natural measurement of 200 gallons per day. It's a really kind of a per person and per day kind of field that you have to do. But when we looked at the overall logs, we noticed that there was a complete disregard of one grower's irrigation and how they were doing it versus the SOP that we have somewhat set in place for this situation. And we uncovered that we had somebody that went rogue on our watering, and that's why we were having a series of bad runs in a certain room. So, you know, like Brian had said, when we're trying to find problems, there are so many different variables out there that you're trying to find a needle in a haystack. And these, you know, set of tools is exactly that. It helps you kind of pull all the stuff apart that you can hopefully find that one needle that is the differentiator that's causing the difference between one room to another room to another room that has all the same variables as fixed and the same, you know. So that's one way we've been able to use it and find a lot of solutions from some problems.
Great.
Yeah, and I would say our struggle with data before we started utilizing Broadleaf was everyone had their own set of data in different places, right? So we had a lot of good data, but none of it was combined in any format that we could utilize to make good decisions. Everyone had their own reasoning for having their data, so it didn't encompass, you know, everyone else's concerns or quality concerns, just the cultivation. So when it brings it all together, we now have one source, one spot to go for everything. We can pull the data really easily as a team. And everyone's, as Dave said earlier, everyone's on the same sheet of music. So it's nice. And when I want to find something and dig into things, because I'm that data nerd from being an engineer and building spreadsheets to just, you know, do basic functions at my house. You know, the spreadsheets being all over the place, I couldn't get the information I needed easily. I had to go, you know, talk to everybody and then compile the data myself and then put it in the format I liked and then put it and then reformat it because they didn't format it so that I could manipulate the data. And then, you know, just a ton of wasted time that's eliminated by having a system like this, which it's you know, it's really efficient, saves us all a ton of time. And once again, we're all looking at the same data, which is cool.
I think it's always interesting, you know, in this industry, there's a lot of, you know, I think there's a lot of knowledge that is developed over time. You have head growers that have been growing for, you know, past when it was legal to do so. And, you know, so I think one of the natural side effects of that is there can be a tendency to sort of feel like it's all art and little science, and you know, a lot of decisions are made kind of with your gut. And one of the things, you know, that I think data does is it, you know, it can either, you know, reaffirm long-held beliefs about the way that, you know, certain variables might influence things, but it can also uncover surprises or uncover connections that maybe weren't obvious or are not considered to be sort of something everybody knows. So my question would be, in, you know, using data and looking and analyzing trends, you know, can you think of an example or share a time where, you know, you found something that was, you know, counterintuitive or just something you didn't expect coming out of the data that may have contradicted what you know, people just assumed or believed before?
I think for us, one thing that we started really kind of pinpointing is trying to get an exact recipe for a different pheno. You know, in the very beginning, when you just get your license and you're just trying to grow some weed, I think you're just trying to get to that 90% range. But there's that last 10% where, you know, for us, if we're doing some sour diesel or we're doing Kush mints or something like that, those are two wildly different strains that are going to have two different needs on a watering basis, nutrient level, light level, VPD, different kind of environmental changes and stuff like that. And for us, I've been surprised at how drastic each pheno needs a different recipe. I mean, you think that they're all kind of like when you bake a cake, it's all going to be at 425 for 35 minutes kind of thing. And we found that is wildly not the case. I mean, we have 4 different facilities, and we try and trigger them based on what their flowering time is so that we can get like-minded plants together. But even inside that, the different small measurements that you're looking at, like VPD and things like that, are very drastically different across each pheno. And for us, being able to, you can't, like you said, you can't manage what you can't measure. For us to be able to measure this and then actually look at that and analyze the data, because everyone can collect all this data. Like Ryan's saying, my guys used to walk around with pieces of paper and they'd write it and put it in their back pocket and then wash their pants and lose all that data. This data now, it all is collected in the same spot, and you can actually analyze it and say, what went right, what went wrong. Maybe we need to be at 410 degrees with this one and only do it at 32 minutes. And those are pretty significant little small things that add up to a lot of dollars, especially in this industry. Same thing with the processing side. I mean, a 1% difference in yield can be millions and millions of dollars, depending on the batch size. So, chasing those little granular things make up to a lot of big bucks in our industry. So that's one thing that we've been doing.
Yeah, and I would say, using Dave's example from earlier about the watering, I mean, people have ideas of what they think is going to work and what's not going to work. And I think it's always surprising to people, the results, as you work with the teams. Without that data, you don't know whether that change is really what made the difference, right? And continuous improvement is all about creating that standard and standard operating procedures, but also, that SOP is how you do things until you make a change. And when you do make a change, everyone changes, right? So that you can see if the shift actually made an effect. And that's what we're able to do with the software and the data, is to say, when we did make a change, did it shift the actual performance or not, right? But that standard work is so critical to making sure everyone does it the same way every time, so that when you make the change, did it have an effect or not?
Sarah, I imagine you probably have had a few moments working with so many different cannabis clients where, through your analysis, you've sort of uncovered things that maybe they didn't know or didn't understand. Do you have any examples that you could give from that perspective?
Yeah, one thing that, kind of building off one of Dave's comments with the different strains and the different rooms, a lot of times the best data we have is trying to estimate a cost per gram for a cultivating processor, and maybe we're even getting in a little more detailed, based on certain rooms. But what I've been surprised by, what I've seen at some operators, is just how different the variation of the cost can be for different strains. So some might be costing you 90 cents a gram to produce, and others might be closer to $2 a gram or even higher. So when you see that disparity and have that in your decision making, it makes things a lot easier.
I think the last question for the panel I'd like to throw out is, we meet a lot of operators who are in kind of different stages of the process and have different skills, on staff and different backgrounds. So there are a lot of people who have really strong, cultivation background or processing background, but may not have done a lot of data analysis or using reports and data to spot and fix problems. So, for people who would like to leverage their data more and would like to make better, data-driven decisions, what advice would you give for somebody who is kind of getting started and wants to improve?
Get Aperture. Get Broadleaf. No, I mean, to be honest with you, I wish that we had this tool and software from the very beginning, because We started in late 2018, and we started all from seed. So we dropped about 1,000 seeds of 100 different phenos. And the reality is there is so much data that was going around in the very beginning that we most likely lost some of our best strains that we never even knew about. And so for us, if I could have had this from the very beginning, it would have saved me a lot of time, a lot of headaches, and probably would have collected some better phenos and stuff like that. But if I were to just give advice, I would just quite simply say, just give the aperture part an opportunity, because the blanket reports that you get out of that without even making your own custom reports is something that's pretty eye-opening, to say the least. I mean, when I opened it up and I had all my data from the entire life's work of Redbud, I was blown away, because some of these reports I couldn't even get myself. I mean, like Brian said, I had the data, but it was all over the place, and trying to get it all in one spot was nearly impossible. And when we finally turned Aperture on, I knew there were some differentiations from each room, but that was the one that actually validated it when I put that through Aperture. So to me, we said it already, you can't manage what you don't measure, and you got to start from the very beginning. So you got to start measuring at day one. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to make any decisions based on data. And with the competitiveness in this industry and in this market, if you don't have this, you're driving blind.
You got to understand, what are your goals with the data first, right? Like, what do you want to get out of it? So when you do get a system like Aperture and Broadleaf system, you know what you're looking for, because the data is, can send you in a lot of different directions if you're not careful. So you got to make sure you understand kind of what are the key drivers for your business, and stick to those, so that you're mining data that you need and not getting caught in the weeds or chasing things that aren't really the priority, because you're going to find so many different directions you could go with all this data and things you could chase and get in the minutia, but you really want to chase the things that are the biggest drivers for your business, and making sure you understand what those metrics are and what the inputs are, and making sure that the data that you're collecting is good data, and that it's giving you a good picture when you're done, and the integrity of the data and everything else. But you want to make sure that it's driving the right decisions. And so that would be, to me, the most critical thing. And what, Broadleaf obviously helped us pull that together, and you get it in one spot and do what we need to do with it. But yeah, it's really important to understand what's your end game, what's your goal with the data.
I'll add one thing that's a little bit out of the inventory theme that we've been talking about with the, growing and processing. I've seen operators struggle. It's gotten a lot better because banking, especially in Michigan, has there's a lot of options for operators. But in some markets where there's still a struggle with the banking, tracking the cash payments and not having it tracked properly to understand what your actual costs were, then you can't even go to that next level to understand what your different rooms are doing. So a lot of the operators in Michigan now, with the improved banking, don't really have to worry about it, but you'd be surprised at what some of these early operators had to deal with, not being able to track expensive bank account.
That's a great point. Just a note for our attendees, you can submit questions through the Q&A, the Zoom Q&A. We've got some questions already. We're going to do some Q&A right at the end, so feel free to drop your questions in there, and we're going to answer as many of those as we can. Thank you for that insight and input. I do want to talk a little bit, in general about what we've seen as Broadleaf in the industry and working with operators. I think we've touched on a lot of these things before, but essentially, we have a lot of different systems out there that capture different types of data, and it's being augmented with data that's manually collected on spreadsheets or on clipboards. And one of the biggest challenges is that all of these systems don't talk to each other. There is some there is some interoperability and there are integrations that are out there, but at the end of the day, not all of this data comes together in one place, and that we see people struggle with. And some operators are lucky enough to have the infrastructure and the skill sets on staff to roll their own when it comes to data collection and reporting, but it's an investment, and it translates to real time and real money in order to get to even some basic analysis. So what we're introducing is a new product called Aperture, and you've heard it referenced by our panelists who've been participating in a pilot. Our goal was to say, to look at these data challenges and figure out how can we help cultivators to take advantage of data they already have, but that is very difficult to get to. So what we've done is we've built a product that integrates with existing systems, and it automatically goes and it pulls all of that data. So it is taking advantage of the fact that a lot of this data already exists. It already lives in Metric, for example, or your wholesale platform, or your financial system. And so that data is already there. You're already collecting and inputting it for other reasons. So how do we make that easy to access? And then how can we deliver pre-built reports and dashboards that key in on some of the metrics that we know are important, but also give you flexibility to drill into the data, to export the data, and to investigate and take a closer look at what the data is telling you. So for us, it was important to have something where we can immediately deliver value. You can sign up and you can start leveraging the reports and the analysis on the same day, even considering that we want to go and bring in, potentially years worth of data. And we want to give you something where also, we know that data isn't perfect, data collection isn't perfect, but how can we help you find problems in the data? So sometimes, there's data that's not properly managed in these systems. So how can we help you find that and then go and fix that? And then once you've dialed in what's important and how you're going to manage, kind of going back to something Brian said, decide what are those key measurements that you're going to manage against, or the things that you're focused on, and stick to those. How do you bring those together and share those across your organization so everybody's getting the same view and is on the same page? So that was our motivation and kind of our driver to create Aperture as a product for the industry. And we're just going to take a few minutes. We've got Ian Galando, who's our customer success manager here at Broadleaf, and he's going to demonstrate briefly Aperture and show how it works, and give you a little bit of view into some of the reporting.
Thanks, Eldon. Aperture integrates into existing systems and pulls your data automatically and builds reports for you, immediately giving you insights into your own organization. And essentially, it's giving you the benefits of having an in-house data scientist without having to pay for an in-house data scientist. And these canned reports are there for you to open and manipulate to fit your organization's specific needs. And so that's like the first part of Aperture, is we have these pre-built reports that you can go in, you can apply filters for, see, maybe I want to see, plants by strain under a certain license, or I want to see plants by strain within a specific room. You can save those reports, modify them to your own heart's content and what your business needs. Now, the other part of Aperture is then putting those reports onto boards. And so creating boards so that you can have a exact insight into the things that you want to see, creating comparisons side by side that just automatically updates along with your data as those source systems are updated. So let's take, for example, you start your day and you pull up your favorite board on Aperture, and you pull your head grower into a morning huddle to discuss with them And you're looking at your current plants by phase here, and you see that maybe that flowering number has dipped a little from the previous day. And so then you come over here and you dive into the current plants by room, and you see that some of the flowering room numbers are a little bit lower than you expected, than what you saw the previous day. And so you're having a conversation with your head grower as to what happened in flower room 2 that saw us lose about 21 plants. And so you have that conversation, and you have that insight immediately with that grower and how you can improve going forward from there. And so next that you want to do is you want to talk with your grower while you got him there about some recent harvests. So you pull up your harvest report, and now you're looking at your harvest report, and you're looking for a specific harvest here. Here it is, this one right here, this Pineapple Express harvest that you have. It had a really good, for that strain, yield per plant, 0.67 pounds per plant, way better than you would expect for that particular strain. And so you're having a conversation with, well, what do we do about that particular harvest? We've been waiting for those results to come in. It had really good THC percentage. And now I'm talking with my head grower about what exactly did we do, and diving into our grow journals about what we did for that particular harvest that led to such good results. And so you then go back to your board and you move on. And right before they leave, you notice, oh, hey, actually, I just noticed that, our SOP says that we veg for 22 days, but I can see that my average veg time is actually a half day over that. Can you explain that a little bit? Well, we've been popping a bunch of seeds recently, and some of the new strains go an extra day or two in veg, and that's bumping up our average. And so you make a mental note to go back to that harvest report in a few months, once it's been harvested 2 or 3 times, to go ahead and see if the yields are worth it for that extra time in veg versus your other strains. Then you continue on, and you're looking at your failed test reports, and you pull in your compliance officer, and you want to talk to your compliance officer about some of these failed tests. And so next thing you do is, you open up your failed test reports from the board right there, and you look like last 30 days, and you can see that we've only failed 2 tests the last 30 days. Huge improvement over where we've been at. And so just kudos to your compliance officer, and you want to see how you can continue on that improvement. You then take a look at your inventory report, your negative inventory report. So before that compliance officer leaves, you pull this up, and there are some clear issues here. We have a number of entries here that have negative quantities in metric, which obviously is not possible. And so after talking with the compliance officer, they take note of this. They're going to go look at this report, and they're going to go look up each tag individually and rectify these issues, because we obviously don't want to have any kind of negative inventory reflected in metric. That's a data quality issue, and they're going to resolve that immediately. Finally, you come back to your board, and you come over here and you look at your inventory aging report, and you see that you have a little higher than expected in the 180-day plus aged inventory. And you talk to your inventory manager, you dig into that data a little bit, and you see that you have some inventory that's going to age out. And if you don't sell it soon, then it's going to have to be disposed of because it's beyond the age limit for that particular product. And so you call up your dispensary and you have them put it on sale so that you can immediately move that product and not have to lose out on that and trash it completely. So in your brief morning review of your favorite board in Aperture, you've been able to identify some problems with the grow. You've gotten insights into some new plants that are growing. You've seen where you've had stellar average plant harvests and some promising new grows in the grow. You've been able to see where there have been clear data issues, and you're rectifying those data issues. And then finally, you've been able to get word out to your provisioning center to move some product before you have to outright throw it away. So you've been solving a lot of problems with just a few minutes of looking at your data in Aperture.
I just want to, just kind of summarize on Aperture. It can solve problems for a lot of different groups. Obviously in operations and compliance, also in finance, helping collect and drive that data that's needed to accurately compute things like cost of goods sold. Also for investors. So, if you're an operator looking for investors, or an investor, evaluating a potential investment, Aperture as a tool in a very short period of time can produce a tremendous amount of data and insight into that operation. So we think from a due diligence standpoint, it's a really useful tool during that process. And then the last is, for cannabis consultants, who are trying to help operators improve their output and production. Again, something like Aperture, we can spin up Aperture. It's in a completely automated fashion. It doesn't require any onboarding or any work other than signing up and providing the proper access. And within a couple of hours, all of that data is available. All the reports that you saw are automatically generated. So there's no manual work involved at all to get that level of insight. And so we're very excited about bringing Aperture to market. So we're launching on June 27th, so next Monday. And we're starting in 7 states, so California, Oregon, Colorado, Oklahoma, Michigan, Nevada, and Maryland. We are starting with integrations with Metrc, which a lot of what we've talked about today are reports that live in the Metrc data, and also with LeafLink, the wholesale LeafLink platform. So we've built a suite of reports around sales performance, around product lines, around salespeople, looking at trending over time for sales. So there's a lot of exciting insights there. And we've also got reports that take the information from LeafLink, so looking at recent sales and using that to assign values to the plants that are currently growing and looking at upcoming harvests and what those harvests might yield as far as value on the market. So our pricing starts at just under $100 a month for all the types of reports that you saw today. And we are offering a 30-day trial for anybody who's attended the webinar. We're super excited to be launching the product next week. It's been a lot of work to get where we are, and we think it brings a lot of value to operators. With that, I'd like to use the last few minutes to talk about to answer a couple of questions that we have that came in. So one, I think this is an excellent question. The system is only as good as the data that you use. So what are some things that you've done to ensure that the data going in is accurate and relevant?
Well, from my seat, it's your governing body that's going to be looking at that information. So you damn well better make sure it's accurate. For us, we only have one person putting all the information in, and that's our head of compliance. So the same information you're using to analyze the data is the same information that you're reporting to the state, and they're going to let you know right away if your data is not accurate.
Dave, I think you mentioned earlier about letting employees see the data and see how what they're doing contributes. So the question is, how do you convince employees that their contributions are contributing to the overall metrics of revenue or profit or productivity? How do you what makes that light bulb go off for the employees?
Well, to me, it's usually, when you look at where you're at and where you're trying to get to, and if you're going to make those necessary changes, either increasing watering or changing the methodology of growing, and seeing the actual results of, instead of getting 100 pounds out of that room, you're getting 120 pounds out of that room. And we have specific KPIs that we measure our grow team on, and that's how their bonuses are compensated. So for us, we look at it and say, this is how much you guys put out last quarter, and this is how much you put out this quarter. And here's some ways that we as a management team think that we can increase yields and increase profitability through, rosin production versus flower production and things like that. So we just make sure that they get to see the data every single week. We go over it with them. Every quarter, we look at what the results were and how it affects their bonus check.
And I think this question is relevant too. We've been talking about all the different ways that you can use data, but are you experiencing any data paralysis or over analysis of data?
Well, from my seat, I actually think it's the opposite. I think that's why Broadleaf for Aperture is the exact tool to mitigate those kind of things, because it streamlines it and funnels it into a pretty quick and seamless result. It's as my team calls it, the one pagers. That's what we love to look at from a management team, is just give me a one pager. I don't need to see a 22-page report. I just need to see what the actual numbers are. And so for me, it's quite the opposite. It's not data paralysis where all of the information is just kind of spit out into a singular report. And for me, I have my cast of favorite reports. The harvest report is probably one of my favorites, and yields per strain would be the other one, so that we can make good executive decisions. But yeah, I mean, that's exactly what Broadleaf does. It avoids that kind of data paralysis, because there's thousands and thousands of lines on all these spreadsheets, whereas Broadleaf and Aperture just show a quick one pager.
Well, we're at the end of their time. Brian or Sarah, any parting thoughts or comments on the questions we had?
Well, Eldon, thanks for having us today. I appreciate it. I think anybody that can just get a software like Aperture and Broadleaf, implemented, well, obviously they're going to be able to show some results and take data, like Dave said, and prevent that analysis paralysis. I think where we see that most often is in, when you're trying to do some market data and you're getting it from multiple sources and they kind of contradict each other, and you're trying to, weed through what's real and what's not real. I think that's where we struggle with the data more on the market research side. But as far as cultivation, like I said, you got to pick your key indicators that drive your business and stick with those, and then this helps you do that and put it on the one pager, and you can use that very easily, and that the team knows what to do with it. And there's not much question in it. You're not going to have any analysis paralysis, because everybody knows what the data is telling you and what you need to do. So no, it's very powerful. I think the struggle for me, coming from an industry where you produce millions of something in a week, to waiting 6 months to see the results, or 63 days or whatever your growth cycle is. It's tougher to pivot in this environment than it is in a normal production facility, because you see the results so quickly, and you can make changes and react and pivot, and constantly pivot and make these iterative changes that take you from start to finish of the process in minutes. And now we're talking, months, 4 months of, or 63 days. And just that's why this data is so important, because when you do make a change, you have to be sure, because you don't know the results for another life cycle of the plant, so it's super critical. I would recommend to anybody that is getting into this industry, if you don't have data, you're going to be driving blind, and you're really going to struggle.
My final comment, similar to everyone else, it's if you don't have accurate data, then you won't have accurate financial reporting. And there was a question on the Q&A, how does the accurate data help those that are seeking investment or acquisition? If you don't have the data, the accurate financial reporting, that process becomes very difficult if you can't really prove out what your business is doing.
Well, thank you all again. I really appreciate your time. One of the things that I love about this industry is the willingness of people to share information, share their experience, and help people along the way, and people kind of coming behind them. And Aperture is available now in the states that you see on your screen. We invite everyone to try a 30-day free trial by using the promo code WEBINAR. You can find us at aperture.io. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly at eldon@broadleafcannabis.com. Thank you, and we look forward to working with you.